Welcome to Come Talk with Amy, the podcast where sex isn't whispered about, it's talked about out loud. I'm Amy, your host and intimacy coach, here to spark raw, playful, and unfiltered conversations about relationships, desire, and everything in between. No shame, no scripts, just real talk about what really turns us on. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Come Talk with Amy. Hello. We're so excited to be here today. You guys, I have one of the bestest people in the whole freaking world on the pod today, Elyse Sparkes. Welcome, Elyse.
Hi, thanks for having me, Amy.
Thanks for being here. Oh my goodness, you guys. Elyse Sparkes is a certified Restore Your Core movement teacher, pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, and certified personal trainer. She's passionate about helping people sneeze without peeing their pants, reduce chronic constipation, and enjoy intercourse without pain. She created the hashtag Be Kind Body Mind movement to help people be more kind and compassionate to themselves, increase mindfulness as they exercise, and approach movement for mental health and overall healing. She lives by the beach in Ventura, California, and works with people virtually through workshops, group programs, and private sessions. Yes, Elyse, we love it.
I love being here and seeing you.
What a badass. This is such a full circle moment. I have worked personally several different times with Elyse. First, I met her here in New York, where I am. She used to live here, met through a dear friend. During my hot girl summer, Elyse was my personal trainer, as she would get all of the deets while we were working out. My dating and relationships, my sex life. I think it was actually your idea where you were, you should do this as a podcast.
We don't remember. You keep on saying that, but I feel like I have no right to take any credit for this other than I just remember you being so passionate about it. And this energy was starting and you were getting ready to share it with the world. And the only thing that I had to do with it was just encouraging you to do that because I think that it's so important what you're doing here and all your professional experience and your personal experience. So I'm just so happy that you went out and did it and are doing it.
Yeah, Lisa's my hype woman, my first hype woman. And then I think you had already started at that point. This was a few years ago. You had already started focusing on the pelvic floor and that journey. Can you give us, before we dive into everything sex, why did you choose to add pelvic floor training to your personal training?
Yeah, it was really after my own birth experience, giving birth, which I think is a really common thing because it's a time when you start to learn about this area of your body in pregnancy and postpartum. However, the thing that I really learned once I dove in was that it's not just for that population. It's very important for that population, but knowing about this area of our bodies is important for everyone, and particularly when it comes to sex. And so I really wanted to learn more about it and spread awareness and teach people just basic anatomy and connection to their whole pelvis and their pelvic floor area so that everybody could get this information and benefit from it.
And I'm so excited to, with this specific topic too, pelvic floor fitness for all, pelvic floor goodness for everyone, whether you have a vulva, vagina, penis, all of the things, all of the anatomy.
That is the biggest number one misconception right there, in that it's only for certain anatomy. No, it's for everybody, everybody. With female, male anatomy, the musculature is actually quite similar. There's more similarities than there are differences. So it truly is for everyone.
Okay. So, pelvic floor health, I'm a clinician, sounds very clinical. Make it sexy, Elyse. How do you explain pelvic floor to clients without putting them to sleep?
Super quick. Think about it like the hammock area on the base of your pelvis device that helps control and support what comes in and out of your pelvis. Is that sexy? I don't know, but
Stop. I mean, a hammock. Ooh, we all love
right?
a hammock.
Oh, yeah. And also, oh, I'm just coming up with this right now, but you think about that hammock and you think about it how a hammock just gently sways in the wind. The pelvic floor just gently moves with your breath. And that is sexy, right? A gentle movement that's kind of always happening with your breath cycle. So you can kind of tap into it at any time. And then if we get a little bit more into it, you can also think about it supporting the organs of the pelvis. So anything going on with the bladder, the bowels, and the uterus has a little something to do with the pelvic floor. So it's kind of everything going on in
Yeah.
this region.
On that note, what are some sneaky signs for people to look out for that our pelvic floor might be waving a red flag, whether it's in or out of the bedroom?
So bedroom would definitely be pain during intercourse that is unintentional. Intentional, that's a
Sure.
different story, but unintentional, then that is a really big red flag. And the same actually goes for out of the bedroom. So I'm talking about a pelvic exam, in tampon insertion. If you use tampons, any insertion into the vaginal canal that is painful, that's a red flag that you would definitely want to get checked out with a pelvic floor physical therapist or your medical providers. Other than that, we're talking about incontinence of any kind. So urge incontinence, stress incontinence, fecal incontinence.
Sorry, by incontinence, you mean the loss of bowel or bladder function, right?
Yes, any type of leaking that is also unintentional. So basically, going to the bathroom when you intend to be going to the bathroom and not going to the bathroom when you intend not to go into the bathroom. So it's very common for people to say, oh, I can't do jumping jacks anymore. I'll pee a little bit, leaking a little bit when you sneeze or laugh. Possibly even during intercourse or sex. And then fecal incontinence, sometimes it also has to do with having that feeling of not being able to control when you're passing gas. So that kind of a feeling can be kind of part of that as well. Yeah, another one is constipation. But I think it's a really interesting one because I think it's very common. And I think it kind of just gets sidelined or something with drink water and eat a lot of fiber. And while those things are incredibly helpful, there could actually be some functional things that can be rehabbed in a way to help with that. Also, sometimes it goes along with some of the other symptoms. So sometimes being chronically constipated can also make sex more uncomfortable. So it's kind of, there might be a few things going on at the same time that kind of are contributing. And so I think that is a really important one to take a look at. Another one that's important to just say out loud and get out there is pelvic organ prolapse. That possibly could feel a heaviness in the pelvis or shifting the pelvic organs, kind of shifting down out of their suspended position and kind of bulging into the vaginal canal. And there's different types and everything. And again, all of these are signs to really get some more attention to this area.
I love all of these examples because outside of I just gave birth, we're not thinking about our pelvic floor.
No, I have one more. Even sometimes a nagging hip or back pain that has not been able to have a diagnosis in any other way. Sometimes even that, when you address the pelvic floor, can really, really help with hip or back pain. Now, obviously, that's a huge subject and could be a lot of different things. It's just something to notice.
Yeah, that it could be one of the factors for sure.
Yeah.
I love too that you started talking about painful sex that's not intentional, right? Because I grew up hearing that sex should be painful for women, that it's just part of sex. We want to blow that myth out of the water for sure. Sex should not be painful unintentionally. That's your body's system telling you we need to modify something here, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really big misconception as well. It's no, it shouldn't be. There shouldn't be pain with that.
Definitely. There's tons of talk about Kegels, right? But are they actually the holy grail of pelvic health or are we overhyping them?
I personally feel like they're overhyped.
Okay.
However, they are really great for certain things. So I tend to use them in a way to increase awareness around this area of our bodies.
Mm.
But I think what happens in just when I was growing up, like magazines, now just online articles and social media and stuff, is that it does have that weight, like pelvic floor equals Kegels, and it's not quite that. For some
Mhm.
people, it could actually, overdoing them could actually increase the symptoms. I think it's really important, again, to get to a provider who can give you really exact information about what's going on in your body and your musculature to be able to do them appropriately, if at all. There's so many other things as well that impact the pelvic floor that you can find balance, strength, support, relaxation from so many different avenues. It's really, I think about Kegel's one piece of
Mhm.
the larger puzzle, but it's not the only thing that we want to be focusing on.
It's one tool in the pelvic floor pelvis toolbox.
Yeah.
How do you approach pelvic floor training differently for someone who's looking to improve their pleasure?
I feel like it really depends on the person, what they're going through. If we're taking the example of somebody who's experiencing pain during sex, from my clientele and what I see most often is we would want to go in a down training direction, meaning focusing on more lengthening and more relaxation and more eccentric movement. Because a lot of times people who are experiencing that may be chronically tighter and chronically held, and we would want to find that other direction. That being said, there could also be the person who is in the other direction and is having a hard time accessing the musculature at all. And then we might want to be doing more of finding that engagement and really coordinating that with breath work. Over time, though, we're probably going to bring in a lot of other things that might overlap as well, looking at the whole rest of the body, strengthening
Mhm.
the glutes, looking at the adductors, internal rotation of the legs and external rotation. Now I'm getting a little nerdy with
I love
that type of
it.
stuff. Then we'll probably really take it more into a full body approach in either direction. So I think it really depends on where the person is starting from. But I always like to start with that awareness of the area and the connection and the coordination first, and then kind of see what we need to do from there.
As you've been talking, I've had so many visuals of the hammock, to be honest.
Okay, so I have something to say about that. So
Oh.
I think even saying pelvic floor is a little bit deceiving because floor, we automatically imagine something flat and kind of
Mm.
stable. But the hammock, I've also heard people say trampoline or sling. First of all, it has this bowl shaped structure. For people who are listening, I'm holding up a model of a pelvis, but it's not flat. It's like this kind of rounded bowl shape on the bottom. So if you can imagine, the musculature is kind of following that shape. And then it's also dynamic. It's
Yeah.
moving. And also it kind of needs to be ready to respond to the action that is happening. So it
Mhm.
needs to kind of be able to flow and move and contract and release appropriately.
I love how you talked about how it can impact the systems around it and how the musculature around the pelvic floor can also impact the pelvic floor. It's all connected. The body's so amazing. Okay, before we go on to the next question, because I know that you name your models, the lovely pelvis that you just showed us, what is that
Yes.
name? What is the name?
Okay, so we have back here, we have Pelvira behind
Okay.
me for those who can see. And then this is Florence.
Oh, yes.
Florence. Yeah. My clients always help me. So I always put polls out to say, what should these new models be called? And they always come up with the best names.
Amazing. Okay. On that note, I've heard that people say tight is right, but can we bust that myth once and for all? Take us there.
Yes. So not how it works that it really frustrates me. Let's think about it like this. Well, first of all, and I'll probably say this multiple times throughout because it's such a key idea. But
Mhm.
when I talk about strength of a pelvic floor or strong pelvic floor, what I really mean when I say that is a well coordinated pelvic floor, not
Mm.
Sometimes people think, oh, I need to strengthen, and then they just think about contraction. But think about it this: if you're doing a bicep curl with a weight and you're contracting your biceps, you're making it shorter, going in the concentric phase of movement, we're making it shorter.
Mm.
You're not just going to keep those weights up here forever and just go like this and be like, I'm getting so strong just by doing this. No, you're taking the weight down, you're extending your elbow, and then bringing it back up to get that full range of motion. And actually, I had a great physical therapist give me this image one time. And so I always use it because, so let's take that bicep example again. If you put
Okay.
your arms like this right now, like you're gone up in a bicep curl, and then you imagine that these are like T-Rex arms. And now somebody is throwing a ball at you and saying, catch the ball. But your arms are in this, you can't get out of this T-Rex shape.
Uh,
So if you're trying to catch a ball from this position, your chances of catching it are going to be really small. It's going to be really difficult. But if you don't have those T-Rex arms anymore and you have the ability to extend your arms and bring them back and reach away from you and come back, you're going to have better chances of catching that ball. And how that relates to the pelvic floor
mm,
is that a lot of people kind of are holding a chronic tightness, or because they've heard tight is right,
mhm,
just all of those things, Kegel, 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 tight is right, then they're kind of holding this contraction and trying to stay here all the time. But then when you need to do functional things like sneeze, jump, laugh, go to the bathroom, have sex,
yeah.
then the musculature is right here and it can't really do its job as well as if it was in that resting state
Mm.
where it could be, well, I can do this and I can also do this. And by this, I mean, I can contract and I can release. And I'm kind of like, I almost imagine it being like in this resting state of I'm ready, and then I can go. And then I'm ready to act when I need to. Also, I think an important thing to note is I can react at the appropriate level I
Mm.
need to for the demand. I think another thing that gets wrapped up in this tight is right is that you're always going to go to 100%. And it's like, well, for doing some functional things, you might not really need to do that. You don't need that much force. And when people are more on that side of it, then sometimes the function actually decreases. So it's a
Mm.
little bit of a counterintuitive idea that to get strength, you don't always need to be contracted. To get strength, you actually want length and contraction, and you want the coordination to be able to respond when necessary reflexively.
Yes. I love that word coordination too. Mind blown. I really am. Just the visuals that you're giving us and the examples are huge. We came to the right place today, didn't we, listeners? Yes, we did.
I love it.
Let's talk about the breath and what role does the breath play in both working out and as well as turning up the pleasure dial in this context.
Yes. The breath is so important because part of I'm going to go a little bit into the anatomy again. I can't help myself but go into the anatomy. But
Love it.
so part of your deepest core system are the diaphragm. I'm kind of curving my hand like this. It sits right up underneath your rib cage. And then the pelvic floor, where we've talked about. And the diaphragm is actually the primary mover of your breath. And the
Mm.
pelvic floor is coordinated with the diaphragm. So, for example, as you inhale, your diaphragm pulls down and the pelvic floor also pulls. I don't know the word pulls, but it moves down. And
Yeah.
as you exhale, the diaphragm pulls up and the pelvic floor pulls up. So just by breathing and by breathing in that coordinated fashion and getting a lot of movement through your diaphragm, you're also moving your pelvic floor. So that's really important. Another thing is that this breathing can really help your nervous system. Something that can also happen, particularly in the bedroom, is for whatever reason, maybe there's possibly been a trauma experience in the past, or maybe you're just dealing with some pelvic floor dysfunction. And I don't even love the word dysfunction either, but something going on with the pelvic floor, or the prolapse, or any of the other things that we talked about. Sometimes what can happen is your body wants to protect kind of go into that fight or flight state, our breath work can help us go in the other direction, feel maybe more safe and more supported. Then again, allow the pelvic floor to move and do that reflexive action that we were talking about before.
Yes. For better sex, more comfortable sex, more pleasurable sex. Yes, yes, yes. The breath is so many things, and it's with us literally. It's so accessible. It's with us our whole lives.
Yeah, and we hardly ever talk about feeling breath in our pelvic floor. Like that never really comes up in any context that I can think of, except for maybe going back to birth. What's interesting there is that usually we're talking about more of a bearing down sensation, a pushing, and that's not necessarily a tactic that we want to use in other parts of our lives when we are working out or maybe having sex, unless maybe somebody could think of an example where you might do that. But in general, we're not usually wanting to go into that bearing down action into the pelvic floor. So doing some breath work and practicing the breath coordination can really help with that whole range of motion. Again, going back to the range of motion conversation. So it's all kind of connected.
There is definitely one specific kink that I feel, I'm not going to mention, but
Oh,
where
okay.
people would be bearing down.
Okay. See, there's maybe stuff I don't even know about. But actually, I think that's an interesting point, though, because I think it's a little bit more about just knowing what you're doing and being aware of what's happening there so that you're not maybe you're used to doing it in one scenario and then that's fine and cool. But maybe in a different scenario, maybe then when you're taking that to do ab exercises in the gym, then you don't want to be doing that bearing down when you're doing that.
Yes.
So I think it's the awareness of just knowing what you're doing, when you're doing it, and why.
Love that. Yes. We love it. We love it. We love it. Stop, Elyse. Giving us knowledge. Yes. I'm going to be listening to this episode over and over and over, taking notes. Yes, signing up. Please work with you again.
Yes, let's do it.
Yes. Speaking of, can you walk us through what a first pelvic floor focus session with you looks like? It sounds intimidating. Is it as intimidating as it sounds? We want to know all the deets, so go.
So first I would have somebody fill out an intake form so you can kind of tell me what's happening. I have an idea of kind of where we might be starting. Then I like to take people through what I call the pelvic floor ABCs. And some of this we've kind of touched on already, but I think about the ABCs. A, awareness. I do sometimes bring out Florence and Povera. So in full transparency, sometimes even just looking at this can be a little bit intimidating for people just because in our culture, there's a lot of shame and guilt and kind of mixed emotions about even looking at genitalia and anatomy. I mean, this is a model, but so sometimes it can slightly be that. However, the reason why I think it's really important is for that exact reason, is because I'll be just transparent with myself. I think it took me really until I was going into this deeply to be able to really identify the anatomical areas and be able to say anus out loud. And for some people, I think that being able to see a visual is very helpful because otherwise we sort of use these euphemisms. And even I still find myself doing this sometimes, but just being down there or using these things that aren't really saying what we're talking about, but kind of implying what we're talking about. That's okay too. That might be a safety mechanism for some people and stuff like that. But I think it's really important, especially also to see how the organs are inside. And obviously this is the model. It's not exactly this, but I think with that conversation we were talking about with constipation, it's very helpful to see that the rectum is very close to the other organs and the sacrum and the tailbone. And it's when people start to see it, they're like, oh, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think the awareness is a really big factor. I do like to take time with that. Then the B is breathing. So we'll often do some breath work. And then the C is that coordination piece. So that's going a little bit more to finding engagement, finding coordinated engagement and release. That would probably be a first session. And then after that, we start to move more dynamically. So we do get more full body and look at the full
Mm.
body picture depending on the person's goals.
Yes. Love it. Yes. And I love, as a nurse, I love anatomy as well. And it's just so fun to see. And I was thinking too, as you were talking about shame, and literally so the first episode that I did on this podcast was on shame.
I listened to that one. So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I specifically started with shame because we all have shame around sex. Every single person in this world, to some degree, it runs deep because of the things that we were said. Don't say those words. It's something that I'm really trying to deconstruct within myself, within my family structures. With my daughter, this is a vulva. This is, I just explain things and I catch myself when oh, your private area. And I mean, I think it's okay to say private area, but I usually try to talk about it from an anatomical place because, yeah, let's fucking break those shame walls down as much as we can.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. I feel that really does have so much to do with everything that somebody might be experiencing here. And it's such a big element of it. And that's why I think the awareness alone, even when you were saying, oh, I'm thinking about the hammock, and I know you are already really aware, but it's even just having some imagery or having a connection point, those are things that can really make a big difference for people. This is a little bit off topic, but it just came to my head. Some things that I also do with people are really look at just general posture and
Mm,
alignment because oftentimes just awareness of where your pelvis is situated in space can make a big difference for how the pelvic floor musculature reacts and acts. So I've had clients that have just done a simple shift and been now I can connect to it when I couldn't before. I might have just taken us off topic, but I did that just came to my mind. Just those little things around breaking the shame with just those little points that can kind of bring someone more into connection.
yes, let's break all the shame. Let's break all the myths. On that segue, let's get into myths. What are some of the biggest myths that you hear about the pelvic floor and sex that makes you want to scream into a pillow, and not in a good way, because I love a good pillow scream, but during sex? But tell us, we need to know. We want to break
Okay,
it
the
down.
three that are coming to mind right now, I feel my clients are telling me that they're still getting told sometimes from their doctors or whoever it is, if they're having pain with sex, to just drink wine and use lube. And listen, we
Mm,
love to drink wine and use lube. Great things if
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what works for you. However, that's not the prescription for pain with sex. So if you are having pain with sex, that really needs to get addressed in a different way than wine and lube. So that's one thing. Also, the thing about going back to birth, really hope this is not really a thing anymore, but sometimes I see it come up when people talk about if they've had a tear, a perineal tear, or an episiotomy, getting extra stitch to make that opening smaller. And that goes back to the conversation that we were having about the tight is right. And that is doing the opposite of what you actually want. That one really irks me as well because no, you're missing the whole point.
Yes,
Is
yeah.
that's going to make it less pleasurable, not more pleasurable. I don't know. As I'm saying that, maybe somebody could think of an exception to that rule, but I think more so from the person's body who is receiving that stitch, we're not going for tight is right, and it's not even just the opening that we're talking about. We actually want the tissues. If you're watching this, you're going to get the anatomy visual, but we want this tissue to be able to have some elasticity to it. So with scar tissue, some of us might have scar tissue here. There is work that you can do around that to not make it so tight so that you can actually have more pleasure.
Is it true that training your pelvic floor can lead to stronger orgasm, or is that just, some sexy marketing hype?
I think there are a few things. I think that it can really increase blood flow to the area, which helps with orgasm. I think just increasing sensation in general of this whole area can also help. So the orgasm is like involuntary contractions, right? And it kind of, I think, goes back to what we were talking about having the ability for the musculature to respond in the way that it's being called to. So
Mm.
I think it's more about that, but it kind of also goes back to a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, that I think that the misconception perhaps is that it's just only that tightness that is creating the stronger orgasm. And in my understanding, and I'm always open to learning more, so there could be some nuances here, but in my understanding, it's still that range of motion that we need it to be able to go through to get the involuntary contractions in
Yeah.
orgasm.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, let's talk about pelvic floor health DIYs gone wrong. What are the worst mistakes that you see people making when they try to DIY their pelvic floor health?
So this could potentially be a little controversial because there could be
Mhm.
people who are really pro these things. I personally am a little bit hesitant of apps or musical things that have you really going at a beat and a lot and fast
Mhm.
contractions all the time. Now, listen, if you have been to a pelvic floor physical therapist and they have said that those are the type of contractions that are really going to be helpful and beneficial for
Mhm.
you, then by all means do that. But I think it's the self-directed, the self-diagnose people, because I think honestly, I don't even know about a lot of them, but my general awareness is there's a lot of things that like, you'll kegel to a beat and keep that going for a long time or
Mhm.
something like that. And yeah, so again, I feel in my opinion, it's just, I would just want someone to make sure that they are really getting the information that is right for their body. Because again, sometimes overdoing it can actually make the symptoms worse and nobody wants
Yeah.
that. I think it really depends on everybody's body, but I don't love it when people do that without really knowing what's already like
Mhm.
their baseline, what they're already starting at.
Yeah, because it may do more harm than good, depending on what the issues are for them and what's going on in their body.
And it might be great just to have, rather than just kind of DIYing it, going to someone. So I like to be really upfront and clear that I am not a pelvic floor PT, but what I like to tell people about them, because also I feel like in our culture, in other cultures, it's just a given that
Mhm.
if you're experiencing some of these symptoms, then you'll be directed to go to someone who specializes in this. And kind of in our setup, we don't have that. And sometimes we
Mhm.
don't even know that that exists. So that's why I
Yeah.
like to shout it from the rooftops, even though I'm not a pelvic floor PT. I'm please go see a pelvic floor PT, because what they can do is they can do internal work, and they don't have to. So that shouldn't be an intimidating factor. They don't need to. They can do a lot of stuff external as well. However, they can do internal work, and then they can get very specific about the imbalances or
Mhm.
what type of engagement or release is appropriate for someone or beneficial for someone. So that's why I say that. I think also one more thing I'll say about that is a lot of people who are already very athletic or maybe come from gymnast, dance, CrossFit type of background, typically, obviously not for everyone, but typically are already very contracted and strong. So let's take a hypothetical person that then doing this all the time is, oh, that's not actually what's going to help them. So
They need to
yeah.
do more of that relaxation. So person specific. You've already been taking us here literally throughout the whole podcast episode, and I want to hear more. How much of better sex is strength and how much is relaxation and release?
I think it really depends, because let's say somebody is really weak, actually,
Uh,
then they might have general decreased sensation. Actually, finding more engagement can help them increase sensation. And I think the same could be said really in the opposite way, that actually doing some more of the release and relaxation could also help somebody who's more chronically contracted also feel more sensation. So it kind of depends. So I guess my answer really goes down to our own body's awareness and proprioception, which basically just means our own body's understanding of where we are in space going down into the pelvic floor. I think increasing that
Mm.
is the way to go.
I love that. Yeah. And again, like so person specific, really understanding what's going on in your pelvic floor. We want to know, we want to find out, right? For you specifically, of all of the different resources that you've shared with us today. So huge.
Yeah, and I think the feeling it part two is not even just talking about contraction or release, which we talked about a lot, but I even just mean a sensation of this area of our bodies at all. I mean, obviously in sex, we do have the sensation of this body, but I would say that a lot of people actually have a really hard time, even just, yeah, it goes back to that proprioception, knowing, okay, this right here, I can touch this. This is my bicep. Yes, I can feel that. It's a lot of people, and I do work with a lot of people in the postpartum stage. So I also keep on going back to that example. But a lot of people report that it's almost numb. They actually just can't
Yeah.
feel touch or sensation. So sometimes it's just building that back up as well.
Yes, yeah, so common. I've heard that too with friends. I had a period of that for me as well, experiencing that. Not anymore, but yeah. So for our listeners who are, I mean, for all of our listeners who are listening in and want to have, what is one thing today that they can do to start building a healthier, sexier pelvic floor?
So I love this exercise that is called pelvic
Ooh,
circles.
all right.
You can do it right here, right now.
Ooh.
Because you just have to be sitting, and it's really just you can start to get a little rock forward and back in your pelvis.
Mm,
And you can start to, we've been talking about kind of just increase your awareness of the area of your body that is against your chair. It's kind of helpful to have a flat chair. You can go forward and back. You would do that a few times. And then you can take it side to side. And when you go side, I want you to notice that if you lean to one side, you can kind of feel the sits bones that you're literally sitting on, and kind of feel one press down into the chair at a time. So we're kind of going side now. And then come back to the center. And I want you to imagine that you're actually sitting on a clock face, 12 o'clock in the front where your pubic bone is, 6 o'clock in the back where your tailbone is, and then left and right sits bones, 3 and 9. And what you're going to do is you're going to slowly try to connect every hour of that clock face down into the chair. And here's the key though. So even those diagonal
okay.
moments, even so, let's say what's happening at the 12 is you're in an anterior tilt, your pubic bone is pressing down more into the chair. Then you're making your way to 1 o'clock, sort of on the diagonal, 2 o'clock. By the time you get to 3 o'clock, your sit bone is pressing down to the chair. And then you keep on going around. But the thing is, even I can see myself in my video here. I'm sort of accentuating it. So I'm getting this. I don't want you to get that. I want you to
Mm,
feel tall and upright in your spine and just your pelvis moving. And when you do this and kind of take out the external musculature that wants to move around, then it's going to become really internal. You're going to have a really internal feeling. We are addressing the pelvic floor, but obviously we're not even doing a Kegel. We're not doing anything contraction or release. We're just getting the pelvis moving. But what it can do is it can help increase the sensation of this whole diamond shape area that you're sitting on, and also getting some of this deep core musculature to be moving around. So I would say do a couple of those in each direction when you're sitting here. If you can imagine, I'm only moving the bony structure of my pelvis. Do you feel how it sort of gets a little more internal feeling?
yes, yeah. You're taking me back to my Pilates days. Like,
Yeah, that makes me want to say that pelvic mobility in general is really great for the pelvic floor. It wants to
mhm,
be able to move in different directions.
mm,
And if you imagine also that the pelvic floor is almost, those workout resistance bands,
yeah.
you can imagine it like that. When you're moving your pelvis, they're getting to go through a range of motion, which it really loves. especially if you notice, let's say that you're holding a kid all the time on one side and you've got your hips kind of shifted over to one side most of the time, then it would be really great to find more of that movement, of that pelvic movement to the other side, for example, and
Mm.
kind of getting that more balanced.
Yes. All of us mothers can relate to that. And a bag too. I know for me, I tend to use one shoulder if I have shoulder bags, which most days I do, because it feels weird and awkward to shift. But I try to remind myself and shift shoulders when I'm carrying the bags. And I don't do it even though I know I need to.
Same. But then I try to move my pelvis a lot in different ways, but I'm the same with the bags.
Yes, there's solutions. There's solutions for these things. Live your life, carry your bags and your kids as you want to, and to help your body release and relax and get motion, use this exercise. Love it. If someone's feeling disconnected from their body, which is something I hear a lot in, working with clients in their sexual health journeys, where's the first place that you have them start?
My old
Mhm.
answer used to be with the breath and breath work. But what I noticed working with people is that if some people have a really hard time actually connecting in that way. And it's kind of creates a little bit
Mhm.
more anxiety. And so for the people who that works for, go in that way. I also really love a hands on touch, could be anywhere. So, for example, it doesn't necessarily have to be of a sexual nature. That's not really what I'm necessarily talking about,
Mhm.
although that's great too. But I'm talking about
Mhm.
if they're, let's say, even in that exercise that we just did, I say to actually have them touch places in their pelvis, maybe even do a little bit of
Mm.
massage. Let's find your hip bones and actually tell your brain where they are in space. Or let's find
Love
your sits
that.
bones. And so I love to do some tactical stuff like that. Oh, an exercise I love that works really well for a lot of people is getting very soft ball. I'm not talking about a lacrosse ball, like very soft ball or a rolled up towel or something like that, and sitting on one side and getting a little bit of massage around the sits bones. Because look, this musculature, I mean, it really wraps around. And usually a lot of people will not be able to feel breath. I'm doing air quotes, breath into their pelvic floor or the
Mhm.
movement of their pelvic floor in coordination with their breath cycle. But when they do that exercise, when they sit on something kind of massage around here and then they take it out and sit back on the chair, whoa, all of a sudden they're, wow, oh, I can feel that side. So, a really great exercise I love to use for people who just having a hard time connecting is to get some tactical information. So some touch with a hand or other something else. So this is one that I really love. I'll take a really, really soft ball or a rolled up towel and have them sit on it on just one butt cheek kind of around this sits bone. And they're just going to kind of move around on it a little bit, massage this side. There's so much of this musculature that just wraps around and connects all around the
Mhm.
whole seat, right? So once somebody does that for a little while, they take it out and then they'll sit again. And a lot of people who prior had a hard time connecting will be, whoa, like I can feel this side. And it's a really stark contrast between the side that they hadn't done and the side that they worked on. So that's kind of a tool I use sometimes to just get people in here.
That's amazing. I love it. Yes, so many practical tools. So you have mentioned throughout that pelvic floor health is for everyone. We all have a pelvis for partners, right? And we're talking about everyone, who has a partner. How can partners be part of the pelvic health conversation without making it awkward or shamey?
I think it probably starts from clear communication whenever that comes up, maybe beforehand or in the moment, perhaps, if that needs to be. And also maybe bringing them along for the ride rather than having it be a separate thing. For example, if somebody has gone to see a pelvic floor physical therapist, some tools that they might have been recommended are dilators or pelvic wands. And somebody can absolutely do those solo as well. But perhaps maybe it's something that you want to get your partner involved with as well. And they can either use those tools or their fingers or whatever to do similar
Mhm.
type exercises that they would be doing with those tools, but with their
Uh-huh.
partner. Also, I think just hands on touch and massage is amazing. And sometimes maybe
Mhm.
without an expectation of what happens during intercourse, but maybe more geared towards healing. And an example of that might be somebody who is feeling held or protected and having a hard time finding more of an open breath, of an inhale phase of movement and a relaxation. Maybe there can be a sort of no expectations playtime or something where just kind of
Mhm.
exploring the area, doing their breath work while their partner is maybe even massaging some of the areas that sort of make the person feel that protective mechanism, something
Uh-huh.
like that. But I think it's almost welcoming that person into it rather than having it be, oh, this is something I have to do in private or by myself. I also just thought maybe even doing some pelvic circles together.
Fire up those pelvic fly. It's so sensual. It can be, right? It can be a sensual, it's a great foreplay in a way. Ooh, you can even do some eye gazing. Ooh, yeah. And I love too bringing for people who may be prescribed to use dilators and the wands. I mean, they very much look like or very similar to sex toys in a way. The penetrative sex toys, obviously they have a function here to work with that musculature and helping, but it's bringing your partner into it, I think is so hot because it can help guide them into understanding if your play is penetrative in any way by helping and assisting the dilator. And there's a communication aspect, right, for the person that is receiving the insertion of the dilation and the person that's doing it. It helps to see and understand that person's
Yeah.
body, right? And because often in sex we can get going. You said it perfect. So hot to bring your partner in. It helps increase understanding your partner's body, how to play with them. I think it helps with increasing that communication piece. I have one last question for you before we come to completion round. So, what are some of your favorite moves or exercises to build confidence in the gym and in the bedroom? I mean, you've given us some already, but do you have any final ones that you want to share with us?
Yes, we talked about the pelvic mobility and a lot of the breath work. I think in the gym, I love a lot of types of hip hinge movements where
Okay.
you're hinging at your pelvis. I love those with a little bit of internal rotation. So the leg bone, whether you can do it from your pelvis or from your leg, but focusing on internal rotation can be really helpful for your pelvic floor. Also, we kind of mentioned it before, but adductor strength. The fascial lines of the adductors really come right up and into the pelvic floor. The adductors are not the pelvic floor, but some people talk about them almost they're one piece, like it's all connected. So that's a really great
Mhm.
place for both length and strength. And something that we haven't mentioned yet, but I think is a really important piece, is taking a look at your psoas. So your psoas, your two bandy type of muscles that actually connect your trunk to your legs. So they're coming at your spine and then cross in front of your hips. And also ties really deeply into that fight or flight mechanism that we did kind of touch on before. So doing some restorative type work in the psoas, which is not necessarily just stretching it, although that can be helpful as well, but doing some restorative work around the psoas can be really, really helpful. And then one more piece I'll add on to that. It's already a lot, but I also love to talk about the feet, even though they seem so far away from the pelvic floor.
Okay.
They really connect in several different ways to what's going on with the pelvic floor. So I like to look at what's happening in someone's feet as well.
Ooh. Hello, cliffhanger.
Feet for part two.
Feet for part two, all about feet and pelvic floor. Hello. Oh my goodness. Elise, you have been such a gift to me, to our listeners today. Amazing. Mind blown. So many key points and practical tips and exercises to take away from today. So thank you so much for sharing yourself, your knowledge with us. Like, amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This is truly
Amazing.
an honor to see you doing this and sharing so much important information and just support and guidance and love into the world for something that we all really, really need. And I'm just honored to be a part of it. And I'm so excited to see what you're doing.
Yay. All right. So I like to come to completion and do a little rapid fire round before we really say goodbye. How do you feel
Okay,
about
let's
that?
go. I'm so wordy. I'm going to try to keep it to rapid fire.
I always say rapid
Okay.
fire-ish. Fire-ish. Yes. Okay. So question number 1, Kegels, always, sometimes, or never.
Sometimes, and it depends, and see a pelvic floor PT.
Love that. Question number 2, stronger orgasms, fact or fiction?
I think it's true, but remember that we're talking more about sensation, blood flow, and the ability for that involuntary rhythmic contraction rather than, oh, strong equals just contraction and health. So not that way, but the other way, I think, yes.
Yes. So sexy. So hot. Love it. Love it. Love it. Favorite position for pelvic floor relaxation?
It's like a downward facing puppy pose. So think downward dog, but instead of being that, you're on your shins with your hips directly above
Mhm.
your knees, and you could make a little pillow for your head, which I guess could also kind of be a position. But if you're just doing it for an exercise, you can really relax there and focus into that hammock diamond shaped pelvic floor that we were talking about, focusing on the breath there. Another one that I really wanted to say for everybody listening, it's on your back with your feet up on the seat of a chair or a couch. So you get really close, you get your butt really close to the couch, let's say, and put your calves up there and then just fully relax. It has to be high enough so that you feel fully supported, your legs feel fully supported. And then same thing, once you're in that position, bring your attention to your breath, just your natural breathing cycle, but particularly have your mind in this area of the pelvic floor as you're noticing your breath work. And it's a really great position. And people usually are feeling more sensation.
So, in my not so humble opinion, those can both be sexual positions. Hello, receiving oral in the second
Oh,
one.
there you go.
Yes and yes.
Yes. See, this is good. This is good. I'm getting ideas.
And I have to say, one of my signature moves, I love pulling this out in the bedroom when I'm being penetrated by a penis owner, is tightening my pelvic floor around as there's thrust, as there's insertion. And I like to tighten it and then relax it, tighten it and relax it. We need that coordination. We need that movement. We should collab on a little guide. I love it. Yes. Okay. Question 4. One word you'd use to describe a healthy pelvic floor.
Coordinated.
I love that word. It's so hot. Yes. Okay. Last question. Sex toy or body weight workout? What's more effective?
Both.
Yes. Elyse, thank you so much. I love this. I love this. I love this. We'll definitely put in the show notes where our listeners can find you, but do you also want to just tell everyone briefly before we say goodbye?
Yes, just anywhere at my name. So Elyse Sparkes, it's spelled really funky. It's ELYSESPARKES.com, or that my name on social profiles. I am mostly on Instagram for the social profiles, but you can also email me if you have any questions about this at ElysesSparkes.com. And that's probably actually the fastest way to get to me. And you will see when you go to my website that some of the things that we talked about, I have in a PDF that's busting some myths about the pelvic floor. So if you want a reminder on that, that's there. Yeah, and I think that's it.
Yes. I love it. Thank you so much, Elyse. Thank you to our listeners for listening in. That's all for today, lover. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. If you liked this episode, share with a friend, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again.